saying Filipino was always kind of like, what, who, what's that?
Light waves.
I really asked my mom, like, hey, are we Filipino? So yeah, you didn't know?
Listening.
Oh girl, that's some internalized bullshit.
Tell me about the light waves. Secrets of the moon.
The Filipino story and their histories is not going to go out in a bang, it's going to go out in a whisper. Because when people stop talking about it and they stop teaching about it, no one's going to know we exist.
Set me free. Set me free.
For Filipinos, just realizing our present, right, where we are in relationship to the trajectory of American sort of master narrative history, right? Our importance and our place in that history is, it's a beginning point, right? Because we've spent so many years, I mean, we as people who have grown up in the American education system, we have spent so many years not even knowing what our place is in that trajectory.
Like in Santa Clara, it's very whitewashed, it's very mellow, it's very suburbia. There's no ethnic studies, it's all about whatever is produced you see on the news. People like look down upon people who are empowered or embrace their natural roots because no one no longer remembers their roots anymore. And I've learned from pre-K to high school, it's all been like what has been in that text, it's been like white history. It's all from the white perspective, and I'm just like, well, there's more to it. There are more people in this country than just white people.
One of the reasons why I took up nursing was it was something that my mom told me to do. And I feel like, just that act of going into nursing school has some sort of historical reason why. My mom coming here has a historic reason. I feel like immigration, is rooted in something else, something that was done to the Philippines. Why we are, exporting, I don't want to say exporting, but kind of like we are, putting all of our Filipinos out of the Philippines because there's no jobs. Why is that?
There was a point when I was growing up where I almost joined a Mexican gang, but then, because growing up, sometimes you have a lot of folks who bully you, and like the way that you try to find that protection is through a gang. And I had an uncle who used to he wasn't a gang member, but he used to hustle drugs, and he used to be around a lot of gang members, and he found out about that, and he was like, yo, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you shouldn't be chasing after that type of lifestyle. What you should be doing is learning about your history, learning about your people. What you should be doing is asking the story of why your grandma decided to come here to America, why your mom is in America, why you're here in America.
I eventually came to learn that our being here had everything to do with, America having come to us in the Philippines at the end of the 19th century. And the kinds of attitudes around, American attitudes around, taking the islands as a colony, what kind of dehumanization public campaigns had to happen in order for the American public to buy into, taking the Philippines as a colony to educate and civilize and Christianize, etc.
If you look at an American textbook, the Filipinos will be in there maybe for a page, in the Filipino-American War, which is one of the biggest wars in American history and took some of the most lives our country has ever seen. It's only a paragraph, and it's only briefly mentioned what happened. It's like, oh, we had the Philippines, it was like a colony, it was a province, and then it was given back. It doesn't mention any of the injustices that went on in the Philippines, none of the millions and millions of civilians that died, none of the land that was destroyed. It doesn't talk about how, after World War II with Marcos, how America screwed over the Philippines. It doesn't talk about how America continues to mess up the Philippines and destroy it and its culture and whatnot.
Like, if you were to talk about World War II and the Bataan Death March and schools today, at most you'd probably see a paragraph of the Filipino-American War.
If you look at the Filipino language, we had our own language and religion before the Spaniards came and before the Americans came and the Japanese. That was completely destroyed. Baybayin is no longer mainstream. It's known of, but it's not standard. We're using the Roman alphabet, which is English.
We've had so much of our history taken away from us. It's to the point where it's even Tagalog is starting to become a lost language.
It was funny because I was reading, I don't know how true this article was that I read, but it was saying how Philippine was pretty, self-sufficient before Spain came. The Chinese actually loved trading with the Philippines. We were well renowned for our pots and our crafts, and we were very kind, and people know us that way. And we were living off our land, and it was more of a matriarchy than a patriarchy, and having our own culture and everything. Like when I read that, like, I never knew that, and it was eye-opening, right? And then we have now Spain that came for however many years, hundreds of years, and totally changed what we are.
Scholars in the Philippines believe that were values that Filipinos had even before colonization happened in the Philippines. And that set of pre-colonial values, those set of ways of seeing ourselves with each other, continue to remain with how we interact with each other every day. But the thing is, we don't realize that that those things are existent in the present, right? We don't realize that these wonderful things, this being sensitive to our environment, being able to be empathetic with one another, being very just sensitive in general to what people say and do, are all attached to values that Filipino scholars believe that Filipinos had for a very, very long time.
If I didn't know my history, I'd probably be really lost. It's a way of healing, and it's, to me, like when you learn your history, it's like a freaking weapon. Like, you know, you defend it.
As I started learning more about like culture and about like how much of our history is like not spoken about, and how like important it is to American history. We learned about like the I Hotel, like San Francisco used to have a Little Manila next to Chinatown. That's no longer talked about. They don't even got posters up for that. In the VEC they got, which is in downtown too, you got veterans going there who are like living on cans because their government, their own like country won't take care of them even after everything they've done for them. They're living on scraps, and there'll be like 5 of them to an apartment room, and they'll be packed with all their stuff in there. Like their family's stuck in the Philippines, they're in there by themselves. This building's called Cesar Chavez, but during that, like the Delano grape strike, you have Philip Veracruz and other key Filipino figures that were like the starting block for that, but they're not mentioned at all.
When the generations were to like future generations and generation after generation, like I don't want what little history we have to be lost, you know, what little history we have to be lost, what little our history to be lost.
And you have people to be proud about. If that history didn't exist, then it wouldn't give me the momentum to continue to give back to the community, and to be proud about like where I'm from. Learning that the history has just given me like a glimpse of a whole new world, you know, and it's like really like deep in my heart.
Yeah, that's where I kind of started to realize and have this own self-critical reflection of who I was as a person, and that was when I was 6th or 7th grade, and you know that's really deep. That's like a that's a deep, intense struggle that you have being a 7th grader, trying to choose like, yo, I want to be in this gang for protection, but also at the same time I really want to know who I am. And from that point, that's where I really started a lot of my own self-education of Philippine history and culture, and really tying that into the stories that my grandmother would tell me, that my mom would tell me, that I'd hear from all these other relatives. And from there, I could see history and my own personal life mesh together.
It's just a beginning point. It's a reminder of things that our elders have done for generations, right? And that we don't have to start out of nothing, but it can't just stop there, right? We can't just have this consciousness born out of what happened before 1965, right? We have to realize that from that was a foundation that was created so that we can then have a diversity of experiences afterwards.
As an 8-year-old child who was in the Philippines, being separated from my mom, like it would have been nice to know, you know, the historical reason why my mom had to leave the Philippines in order to provide for me and my brother, right? And I think many children are also suffering even longer years than I did, being apart from their mom or dad. And the fact is, our government is responsible. You know, America was responsible. These imperial countries are responsible for that. And I feel like we forget that, or we don't really have a sense of the roots of migration. You know, for the longest time, I blamed my mom of why I'm undocumented. And, you know, knowing the history of why things happened made me feel like, no, it's not her fault. It made me have like a different perspective on where I am now and why everything is as it is.